Welcome to Crypto Disrupted. I'm your host, Trent Lipinski. I'm here with David McCarville. He's a lawyer with Riley Carlock and Applewhite, and we are here to talk about the legalities of crypto. David, can you tell us a bit about your background and how you got into cryptocurrency?
Yes, thank you, Trent. Happy to be here. I've been practicing for 12 years. My primary practice is in estate planning and administration. Prior to being a lawyer, I was in international transportation. I managed shipments of spent nuclear fuel, enriched uranium, traveled internationally, and got to see how people live in third world countries. And so my entrance into crypto, really last year, I listened to Tim Ferriss's podcast with Naval Ravikant and Nick Szabo, and that just blew my mind. So since then, I've gone deep into crypto and blockchain, just trying to understand how it works. And I've also been able to work with some clients who are founders in blockchain technology companies. And I can see how this technology is going to transform the legal profession and how corporate governance works, how asset management works, and how the financial institutions work. So very excited to be a lawyer right now. I'm not sure that anybody's ever said that before, but it's a good time to be a lawyer if you're interested in this space.
And have you looked at smart contracts? Do you have any thoughts on, the future of smart contracting as a lawyer from a legal perspective?
Yeah, I have. I've looked at smart contracts. There's a few companies out there right now. I think Vault is one based in Switzerland. They're building a smart contract platform. Obviously, the smart contracts that have fueled the ICO boom, that's an incredible innovation. Clause.io, there's a few other companies out there that are trying to build platforms specifically for lawyers in this space. And I haven't seen anything that I can definitely use right now, but they are coming, and I'm sure there's some out there that I need to start playing around with. I'm not a coder, but I'm starting to appreciate that I need to get comfortable reading code and understanding it. But ultimately, that work, I'm looking forward to working with some programmers in the future who can help.
You're already a coder. You're a lawyer. That is code.
It is code, yeah. It's very archaic Victorian era language. Yes.
Yeah. So you're just speaking a different programming language than the rest of us. So
yeah, it's very similar. I think a lot of times when lawyers write contracts, you don't know where the bugs are until it is out there in the world. Same thing with the programmer.
Yeah, exactly. So, we were talking a little bit about ICOs before we went on the show, and I'd love to kind of get your thought on, the ICO space, the legalities of, what you're seeing and, regulations, and kind of get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think right now it's obviously a very difficult time to give clients firm advice, but there are some tried and true methods. You can use exemptions under Reg D and Reg S. You can follow the SEC guidelines and make sure you're doing everything appropriately and legally there. But it's not the same as what EOS has done with a $4 billion ICO, running it out of a foreign jurisdiction. So I think it really depends on the project. And this is such an interesting space we're in because we're talking about raising money through a securities fundraising type device for an asset that can act like a currency as well as a software license. And it's just a very interesting connection between these different asset classes. It's, I think per project, you want to look at what exactly is the developer trying to do. And I think too many projects are trying to do too many things at one time and not doing any of them very well. So if you're trying to create a cryptocurrency that is a payment method like a Dash or Bitcoin, that's one very specific application, and that makes sense. But you have to monitor the currency laws and make sure you're in compliance there. And it's a difficult space. It's so wide open. There's so many different use cases here. But I think for right now, doing it in a controlled fashion is the best way to raise money in the US, because if you do something incorrectly, you could very much have to pay back all of that money to the investors. Yeah. And the SEC can come down very hard on you. So you want to be very, very careful about how you raise money.
And the SEC recently ruled that both Bitcoin and Ethereum are not securities, which was an interesting ruling because, there's been some fear and kind of speculation that they were going to rule that, Ethereum was not a utility token. But at the same time, there's, a lot of the ICOs now have moved actually to private sales. So they're only taking accredited investors in the US. So I've seen a lot of the ICOs that I've advised on and talked to, that's kind of the move they've made is, okay, we're going to go, we're going to do an ICO still. We're still going to use tokens. We're still going to use the new technology. We're still going to use blockchain, but we're going to try and adhere to the existing, venture capital accredited investors, and try to use some of the existing regulatory frameworks. Any thoughts on that? Have you seen anything similar to that?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, right now, if you're going to raise money through an ICO, you want to use accredited investors, make sure you're in compliance with the SEC guidelines. The last thing you want to do is raise a bunch of money and then have to turn it back over to the investors. And most projects in this space, and I think you appreciate this, most projects are going to fail. Just like any business is more likely going to fail. I think the survival rate after 10 years is something like 90 to 95% will fail. So 5 to 10% may make it. And that's true of any business. And so in this space, especially, you want to be very careful with how you raise your money. And there are opportunities to go overseas to raise money. Switzerland has very advanced laws in terms of how they are structuring ICO fundraising. But then again, you have the situation with Tezos where they raised their money through a Swiss ICO, and you can see they're locked up in all kinds of litigation associated with the founders and the foundation. And again, it comes back to being able to be very, very clear with your investors and with the management team how you're going to manage the development of the project. And in that particular instance, it looks like there may have been some misunderstandings about who was responsible for funneling the money and actually developing the project. So all of those things can be taken care of in advance if everybody's represented by good, competent lawyers and has a clear understanding of what's expected of each party. But that's a whole nother level of lawyer work that needs to be done that I think a lot of people don't want to do up front, or maybe just don't think about doing up front.
And where do you see crypto going? We discussed a little bit about security tokens and the potential for having these regulations and these regulatory frameworks kind of built in to these to security backed tokens. Do you see that as kind of the future moving forward here for crypto?
Yeah, I think so. I think what Harbor is doing, I think there are a number of related type programs where they're creating security type tokens that have lockup periods built into them that will not trade to other non-qualified investors. Those types of innovations, I think, are going to be key because you're then starting to code compliance into the securities. And I think another thing that would be helpful is if you had security tokens act as governance mechanisms for corporations to help them with voting, with appointment of directors and so forth. Yeah. But that probably should be separated from the actual tokens that may be used as access to the software platform. I oftentimes think of these projects as developing tokens, which are really more like software licenses or software as a service type platforms, if they're not pure currencies. And so they probably need different types of tokens for those different activities rather than having one token try to serve all purposes. I think whenever you're doing that, you tend to have some confusion about what's being accomplished. And from a legal perspective, it's just cleaner if you can design things to serve one purpose.
Yeah, I think that's kind of some of the confusion with some of these existing projects is, yes, you can make the argument like Ethereum, for example, is a utility token, but at the same time, it represents their market cap and kind of their overall value. So, does that, it shows that there's value in that utility as a utility token, but then at the same time, it kind of gets conflated with equity and, you're owning a piece of Ethereum, which in a way you are and in a way you aren't. And you could probably make a legal argument either way. So I definitely agree with you that, if you're going to separate securities and equity and those kinds of decision making, it should probably be a separate token away from anything that's a utility token for actually using your software or using your blockchain as a service or a product or as a development platform or whatever it is that the company is actually doing. separating those from a legal standpoint probably makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're going to see a lot of interesting innovation over the next couple of years. I really do like what Harbor Token is doing, and I know that there are a bunch of other projects out there. Zeppelin is another one that's building some sort of a transactional permission layer into the token. And once you start doing those types of things, you open the door to a lot of innovation in terms of how assets can be tokenized and how individuals, for instance, in estate planning, when I'm working with someone and developing a dynasty trust that's going to last for 500 years, it'd be really nice to have some technology deployed that would allow this person to see their wishes carried out. And I think there's some really interesting opportunities there going forward.
Can you kind of just kind of summarize and go into with your background, what the traditional system looks like? How much paperwork are you having to do for, traditional asset management and wealth management?
Mm-hmm.
What is that, what is the actual, what does it actually look like right now without the blockchain, without this technology? How long are some of these processes taking? How long are some of these contracts? What does that look like right now today?
Yeah, it takes too long. It takes too much language. But the reality is, if you have a client who has a high net worth, they probably have holdings across a lot of different asset classes and in different jurisdictions. And so you have to plan for that, and you have to review all of their assets with them. And then you have to try to develop a plan that effectuates their wishes, making sure these assets are liquidated or distributed in kind to their relatives or a charity that they want to receive that asset. And it typically requires a number of different trusts. You'll have a living revocable trust, which is simply a probate avoidance type vehicle, which allows people to administer their assets without going through the probate court. And probate simply means to prove. So if you think about the home that you live in San Francisco, if your name individually is on it and something happens to you, you're either incapacitated or deceased, your loved ones aren't going to be able to move in and sell it to somebody else right away or refinance it. They're going to have to go to probate court to prove that they actually have the right to do that as an heir of yours. And that process takes a lot of time and money. So if we put the home into a living trust, then the successor trustee that you designate can manage that process, and the title insurance underwriter and their in-house counsel will respect that. So that's one very common vehicle we use, is a living revocable trust. But for people who have a very high net worth, they may want to take some assets and separate them from their own estate, and they can do that. They can create irrevocable trusts, which, if you think about an irrevocable trust as a one-way street, it's that asset moving out of your control, and it's being controlled by the document that we create, by the trust terms. And then it will be distributed, the assets will be distributed upon specific events over time for beneficiaries. And we have clients who have a number of irrevocable trusts and a revocable trust, and they'll have assets in a 401k or an IRA that are outside of both of those. So it starts to become pretty complicated pretty quickly. And part of what I am hopeful we can do with this technology is give clients a better way to understand all of that and to explain it to their loved ones, to their kids and family members who are going to be responsible for inheriting those assets. So I think there's a lot of potential in that area.
And is it possible that with the blockchain, if you've tokenized these assets, or maybe, these assets are in a smart contract, now the transfer of those assets, given, something happens to the asset owner, now it's a push of a button to transfer them. It's address to address, it's a transfer. It's not having to necessarily go to a court. It's not having to go through all these approvals and all this processing. It's a click. Do you see that as the potential future of this space?
Yeah, I think that's very possible. I think with self-sovereign identity programs like Civic and others, right, there's the ability to prove who you are, which is, one of the main issues in estate planning, is making sure that the beneficiaries are actually getting the assets. You want to make sure that they're getting it. You also want to make sure that they're getting the assets at a time when they're ready, willing, and able to receive the assets. And part of what we do too is try to protect beneficiaries from creditors, predators, and life, right? I mean, how many people do we know who experience a loved one with some sort of ailment, whether it be a drug addiction or a gambling addiction, something like that, where if they were to receive a large sum of money or even a smaller sum of money, they might not do the right things with it. And so this technology, I think, can be used to help effectuate people's wishes for their loved ones to receive this money and have it truly be a gift rather than a curse, which is unfortunately what happens too often, right? So.
Well, and then there's always disputes between family members, and there's a lot of things that can go down.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I see also with this technology. We have a number of cases, and most attorneys in this estate planning business can tell you cases where they've had a holographic will, which is simply a handwritten last will and testament, appear out of nowhere, and it purports to give the decedent's assets to one person and disinherits a whole bunch of other people. And it's a difficult process to go through litigating that. And
it's usually written on a napkin, right?
A napkin, yeah. And when the person was ill and all kinds of medications were in their system. So, this kind of thing, I think, can be avoided if we have technology and we're using it correctly. So this technology can be a very effective tool.
And you're actually going to be teaching a course on this soon, correct?
Yeah, I am. I'm going to be teaching some courses over at ASU Law School. Gary Marchant there has a course syllabus been approved by the law school for this fall. We'll have 13 classes. Bryce Suzuki, myself, and Gary are going to teach a few courses. Very excited about it. One of my courses I'm going to teach is on Bitcoin, and I've invited Jameson Lopp to appear and talk. I think he's going to appear by telephone or video conference, but I'm very excited to have him talk to the students. We're going to have 40 third-year students in there taking a seminar class, and they're going to learn a lot. I'm going to learn a lot. Looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great class.
Awesome. I mean, so it's just fascinating that we're finally at this point now where, like, this is real. Like, you're going to be teaching an actual course on this, trying to teach the next generation of lawyers about cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. So, it's crazy to think about, because really what we're talking about here is distributed ledger technology. I go to these blockchain events and, I see all these people excited about this, and really we're talking about a distributed database here. So it's just, to me, it's interesting as, coming from a tech background to see that, there's actual law courses that are going to be taught on this now. There's actually a new generation of lawyers that, they're thinking about smart contracts. They're thinking about, tokenized securities. They're thinking about how can we use technology to, surpass these traditional, platforms and traditional ways of doing things, so that we can get away from that, these long, processes, lengthy contracts, and move towards technology that makes these processes more simple, more efficient, and easier for the clients and the people that are, need wealth management or asset management, make it easier for them. So, this is, we're in a moment in history here where, there's a shift now, where, lawyers are studying distributed ledger technology.
Yeah, I think it's remarkable. I think it is important for us as lawyers to think about how we can deliver value to our clients. And that should include utilizing whatever the latest technology is, the tools that are out there. I think we'll start to see more flat fixed fees. I think we'll start to see clients appreciate the value being delivered and the results being delivered by their attorneys, and less dependence on the billable hour, which sometimes the billable hour rewards inefficiency. And I think we'd like to see a move away from that. I know a lot of lawyers are tired of doing time entries. So no, I think it's really an interesting time. I think to the extent that, programmers and technologists like you can work with attorneys, a multidisciplinary approach to a lot of these common problems that we're all going to face here, involving legal issues. I think that can be very, very powerful, and it's really not happened in the past. So I'm hopeful that it will start to happen now.
So do you see, is there some cons to this technology to kind of disrupting some of these systems? Because I know for some lawyers, this, especially lawyers that have been practicing for a while, this may seem like a disruption. Like, a lot of what they do is about to be automated, essentially. Is that a good thing to you, or is that a bad thing? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I know there are some attorneys who may, not think that blockchain or this technology is going to do anything to change their practice. And I think, over time, they're probably going to be proven wrong. But, the reality is that we want our clients to succeed, and we want our clients to trust us. And this is very much a personal services business. So you like to be at a good law firm. This firm I'm with is great. We've been around for 70 years, great reputation. That helps. But at the end of the day, the clients have a personal connection with their lawyer, and they come to trust their lawyer, which is another component of blockchain, right? We create trust, or Bitcoin created trust through these algorithms, through proof of work. And then now you can create it through proof of stake and perhaps delegated proof of stake. And so lawyers are trusted advisors, and I think that will always continue to be the case. And what we have to do for our clients is to deliver something of value to them. And if it involves using blockchain technology, then we absolutely should embrace it. And I think you're going to find more attorneys embracing it going forward. And to the extent that it's disruptive, I think that it'll be more disruptive for people who currently cannot afford to hire a lawyer. And that's a good thing. I think there are a lot of underserved people who would like to hire an attorney but can't afford to. And I think this technology may be able to be used to provide legal services in a very efficient way to more people. And so I'm hopeful that that's one outcome.
Almost the LegalZoom model, but possibly in a way that, is a little better than LegalZoom.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a way to do it.
Because, for example, if you're setting up a S Corp or a corporation, being able to fill out, your basic information, being able to do that online, be able to click a couple buttons, have that executed properly. Those types of legal services can be automated. So, and there have been companies that have tried to automate them previous to blockchain technology, and some of them have done okay. Some of them have done very well. And now with smart contracts, we're going to be able to do that on a whole new level. And it's going to be able to go into a wide variety of different use cases, not just setting up an LLC or, something basic like that. But now you're going to be able to, possibly take a smart contract off the shelf and execute it between parties without maybe necessarily having to actually having to speak to a lawyer and go through a full process. In some cases, that's a good thing. In other cases, maybe not the best thing. But that future is coming, that you're going to be able to take smart contracts off the shelf or buy them from a marketplace and execute them potentially.
Yeah, I think family law is probably the one use case that I can see. If you ever get to a point where your identity and your assets are very clearly defined, the rules of family law, community property laws, and child support and spousal support, you can probably agree upon those going into it. If you're able to develop a technology that most people in family law are willing to embrace, a lot of those people would rather use that technology than spend a whole lot of money fighting. Now, there are always people who just love to litigate and fight, and that's fine. There'll always be lawyers for them. But for most people who just want to be practical about it, I think that the technology allows a practical approach to division of assets and payment of child support and those types of things. So I think there's some room there.
No, absolutely. Being able to divide up different assets and figure out what those allocations look like, and using algorithms to be able to do that. If everything's on the blockchain, if everything's, if all that data and all those assets are being managed properly through this technology, it's a lot easier to split them up now. So it's not the process before of, having to just spend 6 months in discovery just trying to figure out what the assets even look like. Now everything's literally on a ledger, and exactly what your assets are. So that's important for lawyers. That's important for the clients. Now it's no longer a guess and check type situation.
Yeah, and I think corporate governance, what Arizona here, we're built on real estate is one of the big
Hmm.
industries here, and commercial real estate and real estate development are huge. And what I see is blockchain potentially with corporate governance. If you were to create a real estate partnership and have a multitude of partners in there, and one of them passes away, their interest typically would be sold to the other partners at a very steep discount, because if you own a minority interest in the partnership, any CPA or attorney will tell you can probably discount it by 20-30% or so. But if you had records that were clean and audited and immutable, and you could potentially show them to a third party, I think there's an opportunity there to attract third-party investors who would be interested in buying into a minority interest that otherwise might not be interested. So that's another use case that I think blockchain and this technology can embrace. But again, it would require a lawyer, it would require a CPA, it would require licenses and insurance to support the due diligence that needs to go into that transaction. But I think there are a lot of opportunities in that space as well. So looking forward to trying to explore some of these.
I've had a couple guests that have that are looking to apply blockchain to the real estate industry. I mean, it's the real estate industry to me seems ripe for this opportunity. That's some low-hanging fruit for blockchain, because it's the perfect technology for managing real estate. There's definitely a fit there, and if you can simplify buying homes, moving assets, and titles, and write that data to the blockchain and simplify those processes, I mean that'll be huge.
Yeah.
Even everything from leasing a car, to anything that anytime you're leasing property, renting property. I mean, you could even do rental agreements potentially on a blockchain as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think the big concern, and back to your question previously, what could go wrong? The garbage in, garbage out problem exists, right? We have to make sure that whatever we're putting in there is clean and is not going to be hacked later on. That $100 million that was missing from the Parity multi-sig wallet is a big deal, right? And I think we just have to be very, very careful and test these things out and make sure that we have the proper insurance in place. And I think it's doable.
Absolutely. And any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. I've enjoyed your show and enjoyed your writing, and I'm happy we got a chance to chat.
And where can people find you?
LinkedIn is probably the best. David McCarville. I'm in LinkedIn. I'm also on the Riley Carlock and Applewhite website, and happy to connect with anybody who has questions or comments on this podcast as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the show. It's been amazing to have a lawyer finally on the show. So, I've been trying to get some lawyers on here to kind of talk about the legal aspects of crypto, because
I should probably make one last caveat, which is all of this is just my opinion. It's not legal advice, and make sure you consult with your attorney before you do anything in this space. Yeah.
Yeah. Or they can consult with you.
Or they can consult with me. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Thank you.
So again, thank you for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you, Trent. Have a great day.